All right, invention is inevitable, but why write memoir? Why call it fiction and be done with all the hashing about, wondering where memory stops and imagination begins? And if memoir seeks to talk about the big issues, about history and peace, death and love, why not leave these reflections to those with expert and scholarly knowledge? Why let the common or garden variety memoirist into the club? I'm thinking again of the bumper sticker, why question authority? My answer, of course, is a memoirist's answer. Memoir must be written because each of us must have a created version of the past. Created, that is real, tangible, made of the stuff of a life lived in place and in history. And the downside of any created thing as well, we must live with a version that attaches us to our limitations, to the inevitable subjectivity of our points of view. We must acquiesce to our experience and our gift to transform experience into meaning and value. You tell me your story, I'll tell you my story. If we refuse to do the work of creating this personal version of the past, someone else will do it for us. That is a scary political fact. The struggle of man against power, a character Milan Kundera's book, novel The Book of Laughter, and Forgetting says, is the struggle of memory against forgetting. He refers to willful political forgetting, the habit of nations and those in power question authority, to deny the truth of memory in order to disarm moral and ethical power. It's an efficient way of controlling masses of people. It doesn't even require much bloodshed, as long as people are entirely willing to give over their personal memories. Whole histories can be rewritten. As Czesław Miłosz said in his 1980 Nobel Prize lecture, the number of books published that seek to deny the existence of the Nazi death camps now exceeds 100. What is remembered is what becomes reality. If we forget Auschwitz, if we forget My Lai, what then do we remember? And what is the purpose of our remembering? If we think of memory naively as a simple story, logged like a documentary in the archive of the mind, we miss its beauty, but also its function. The beauty of memory rests in its talent for rendering detail, for paying homage to the senses, its capacity to love the particles of life, the richness and idiosyncrasy of our existence. The function of memory, on the other hand, is intensely personal and surprisingly political. Our capacity to move forward as developing beings rests on a healthy relationship with the past. Psychotherapy, that widespread method of mental health, relies heavily on memory and on the ability to retrieve and organize images and events from the personal past. We carry our wounds, and perhaps even worse, our capacity to wound, forward with us. If we learn not only to tell our stories, but to listen to what our stories tell us, to write the first draft and then return for the second draft, we are doing the work of memoir. Memoir is the intersection of narration and reflection, of storytelling and essay writing. It can present its story and reflect and consider the meaning of the story. It is a peculiarly open form, inviting broken and incomplete images, half-recollected fragments, all the mass and mess of a detail. It offers to shape this confusion, and in shaping, of course, it necessarily creates a work of art, not a legal document. But then even legal documents are only valiant attempts to consign the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to paper. Even they remain versions. Locating touchstones, the red music book, the olive, my father's violin playing is deeply satisfying. Who knows why? Perhaps we all sense that we can't grasp the whole truth and nothing but the truth of our existence. Just can't be done. What can be achieved, however, is a version of its swirling, changing wholeness. A memoirist must acquiesce to selectivity, like any artist. The version we dare to write is the only truth, the only relationship we can have with the past. Refuse to write your life, and you have no life. At least that is the stern view of the memoirist. Personal history, logged in memory, is a sort of slide projector flashing images on the wall of the mind, and there's precious little order to the slides and the rotating carousel. Beyond that confusion, who knows who is running the projector? A memoir steps into this darkened room of flashing, unorganized images and stands blinking for a while, maybe for a long while. But eventually, as with any attempt to tell a story, it is necessary to put something first, then something else, and so on to the end. That's a first draft. Not necessarily the truth, not even a truth sometimes, but the first attempt to create a shape. The first thing I usually notice at this stage of composition is the appealing inaccuracy of the piece. Witness my first piano lesson draft. Invention is screamingly evident in what I intended to be transcription. But here's a further truth. I feel no shame. In fact, it's only now that my interest in the piece truly quickens, for I can see what isn't there, what is shyly hugging the walls, hoping not to be seen. I see the filmy shape of the next draft. I see a more acute version of the episode, or, this is more likely, an entirely new piece rising from the ashes of the first attempt. The next draft of the piece would have to be a true revision, a new scene of the materials of the first draft. Nothing merely cosmetic will do. No rouge buffing up the opening sentence, no glossy adjective to lift a sagging line, nothing to attempt covering a patch of gray writing, none of that. I can't say for sure, but my hunch is the revision would lead me to more writing about my father. Why was I so impressed by that ancestral inventor of the collapsible opera hat? Did I feel I had nothing as remarkable in my own background? Did this make me feel inadequate? I begin to think perhaps Sister Olive is less central to this business than she is in this draft. She is meant to be a moment, not a character. And so I might proceed. If I were to undertake a new draft of the memoir, I begin to feel a relationship developing between a former self and me. And even more compelling, a relationship between an old world and me. Some people think of autobiographical writing as the precious occupation of a particularly self-absorbed person. Maybe, but I don't buy that. True memoir is written as an attempt to find not only a self, but a world. The self-absorption that seems to be the impetus and embarrassment of autobiography turns into, or perhaps always was, a hunger for the world. Actually, it begins as hunger for a world, one gone or lost, effaced by time or a more sudden brutality. But in the act of remembering, the personal environment expands, resonates beyond itself, beyond its subject, into the endless and tragic recollection that is history. We look at old family photographs in which we stand next to black, boxy Fords and are wearing period costumes, and we do not gaze fascinated because there we are young again, or there we are standing, as we will never again in life, next to our mother. We stare and drift because there we are, historical. It is the dress, the black car that dazzle us now and draw us beyond our mother's bright arms which once caught us. We reach into the attractive impersonality of something more significant than ourselves. We write memoir, in other words. We accept the humble position of writing a version rather than the whole truth. I suppose I write memoir because of the radiance of the past. It draws me back and back to it. Not that the past is beautiful. In our commercial memoir and history, the death camps are back there. In intimate life, too, the record is usually pretty mixed. I could tell you stories people say and drift off, meaning terrible things have happened to them. But the past is radiant. It has the light of lived life. A memoirist wishes to touch it. No one owns the past, though typically the first act of new political regimes, whether of the left or the right, is to attempt to rewrite history, to grab the past and make it over so the end comes out right, so their power looks inevitable. No one owns the past, but it is a grave error. Another age would have said a grave sin not to inhabit memory. Sometimes I think it is all we have, but that may be a trifle melodramatic. At any rate, memory possesses authority for the fearful self, in a world where it is necessary to have authority in order to question authority. There may be no more pressing intellectual need in our culture than for people to become sophisticated about the function of memory. The political implications of the loss of memory are obvious. The authority of memory is a personal confirmation of selfhood. To write one's life is to live it twice, and the second living is both spiritual and historical. For a memoir reaches deep within the personality as it seeks its narrative form, and also grasps the life of the times as no political treatise can. Our most ancient metaphor says life is a journey. Memoir is travel writing then, notes taken along the way, telling how things looked and what thoughts occurred. But I cannot think of the memoirist as a tourist. This is a traveler who goes on foot, living the journey, taking on mountains, enduring deserts, marveling at the lush green places, moving through it all faithfully, not so much a survivor with a harrowing tale to tell as a pilgrim seeking, wandering.